Yo, alright. Um, it's been a week since I've seen this movie. So here it is, the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania review starting now. Wow, of course it's a Marvel movie, so I was expecting this movie to be great. And this movie, it pretty much was. It was a really fun, uh, and ironically universally big movie. And what I mean by that is because it does take place in the quantum realm in a much smaller world. It still had a big impact towards the near future of the MCU in terms of like the next big bad threat coming to coming up to the surface. And what I thought was for the plot was I thought Kang was going to start off having somewhat of a good representation or reputation, kind of towards Ant-Man at least. But then later on in the movie, he becomes a bad guy, and we all would see it coming. But no, he was just straight up coming on, just up front being a bad guy, and he was known to be a bad guy, just this conquering villain. And then of course MODOK, he for a little while, he was rumored to be a peer, and then we saw the trailer. He looks pretty cool. And then the first time I've ever seen MODOK, like the face reveal, it got me speechless, like in a weird way, because a lot of people said that they really literally just kind of like stretched his face and just put it into the weird robot suit, which I think hopefully was intended to look kind of weird because, well, for one, seems weird that to have a big face but like just limpy limbs just hanging there. And yeah, there's that little backstory shot, just him backwards, just butt naked. And then they put the suit on. Yeah, it's just. But I think his performance did pretty well, especially when Kang handles him. The way he just kind of like stop and he's just like, oh, okay, sorry. I think he did pretty well. So it's kind of interesting seeing Darren return. And yeah, I heard it was rumored that Darren, the guy who's Yellow Jacket, was rumored to be MODOK later on. I don't know the full comic story of like who MODOK is and his origin story and whatnot. So I don't know if he, or actually, I really don't think so because there's a show, Avengers Assemble, where they're actually comic accurate. Where in the comics, it was the Wasp who originally called their group the Avengers when all those people came together. But then Yellow Jacket ended up being, I think, Hank Pym. Because he was Ant-Man, he disappeared for a while and then became Yellow Jacket. I don't know if it was like that in the comics, but I hope the show is like pretty accurate to that. And then MCU, they do kind of have to make changes in towards like what the story tries to go to, and of course with like kind of like walking around certain rights with other studios to make some things accurate and whatnot. But yeah, anywho, Ant-Man. Of course, Paul Rudd, he did really well. Continuing on his story, and then throughout this movie, he does kind of try to be in Cassie's life. But he's also low-key kind of judging on what she's been doing, what she did in the past few years. And yeah, it's been like 7 years since he last saw her or something like that. And yeah, we're slowly catching up to their timeline because this is now 2023. This is the year where Endgame happens. So, and then where Quantumania, Shang-Chi, and like some other these shows, and Moon Knight, like some other stories, they take place in 2025. So yeah, it's kind of tricky to pinpoint where these movies and shows take place because Shang-Chi take place just in the midst of She-Hulk, because She-Hulk was like really focusing, or some of it was focusing on trying to free the guy who turns into Abomination. In the middle of that show, he gets taken from Wong to like kind of like train fight, and then that fight ends up being in Shang-Chi. But then at the end of Shang-Chi, this is like days later, or like a couple days later, or so, where at the end of the movie they got taken by Wong and then got talked to with Hulk and Captain Marvel about this beacon being like activated, and then it's been rumored that this beacon signal thing was turned on coincidentally when Shang-Chi used the rings, like the moment he used those rings. And then I think that's the same beacon that Cassie puts down into the quantum realm. I think people were rumoring that this is a beacon that Scott tries to send out if he ever gets like trapped in the quantum realm, which he doesn't. Hopefully the whole thing works out until like the Kang Dynasty. Okay, let's talk about Cassie. People said that they didn't really like her as much, or like she like her part in this movie wasn't like good or something like that. I liked her. I thought, yeah, she's just pretty smart. She's really trying to make some difference into the world. Because there was mention about, yeah, it's just a bunch of people they just lost their homes. And Cassie wants to help out, but then she ends up being arrested and stuff like that. And so actually that scene where she gets out of jail, that is a callback to the first Ant-Man movie when Scott gets later get out of jail, which is pretty cool. And then yeah, she actually has her own suit. I don't know if she made it by herself or if she had Hank help her make the suit. I really hope it's Hank making her the suit, because she had to be smart in order to actually make a suit similar to Ant-Man, which is pretty much all that is, because Cassie's suit and Scott's suit are pretty much the same thing, just different color. And then of course Hope's suit with the Wasp is just I think the only difference is like her suit, it only shrinks and then goes to normal size, and she can fly. I don't think she can embiggen, because they didn't really show that, and I don't think that's really comic accurate either for her powers. I don't think her powers let her do that, or her suit does that. Yeah, there's some pretty funny, silly scenes, especially with her and Scott when they hug. It's like, oh, it's like I'm hugging Godzilla. That was a great one. There is one scene where it really like did not like. Okay, I think the dialogue about this movie, it was just okay. People say it was like really corny and like cheesy. People didn't really like it, and the way the story was told, I didn't mind it. But there's just one scene with the dialogue just kind of really threw me off. Was when Cassie was talking to MODOK. Because she just like straight up punched him pretty good, and then he just got knocked down. He gets knocked down momentarily, and then he's like, "Oh man, like my life's over." Blah blah blah. Or like Cassie was just like, "Stop being such a Richard," and he's just like, "But my I'm already a Richard." And then she just tells him, yeah, it's never too late to be a Richard. And then she just runs off. I'm like, okay, that was... Okay. I do want to talk about some fight scenes later, but I want to talk like certain characters first. Hank, of course, did well. It was interesting that throughout the scene, like I think some people somewhat forget about the ants because the ants were barely involved in this movie, because they were shown that at the beginning of the film they've like evolved kind of in a way to they've gone super smart, that they kind of like operated on their own in terms of like building stuff. And then by I still remember the ants, because like especially with Hank, he was like hearing some sounds every now and then throughout this movie, and I was like, oh, there's probably ants. um and then later on at towards near the end of the movie, it's like a whole swarm, a whole farm just like went after Kang. It was so cool. I love that. um but I'll go into more detail after later on. Yeah, hope she did well. The thing, like her relationship with her mom Janet, is like pretty rough. Especially like Janet, she did not want to talk about the quantum realm at all. And the scene in the beginning where she asked Cassie is like, or she was like, "Oh, you built this satellite thing about the quantum realm. Why you didn't ask me about stuff like this?" And then Hope just went after. She's like, "Well, because you never want to talk about it." I'm like, that's a good point. Like Janet just not did not want to talk about it at all. But then she gets offended when she wasn't asked about it from Cassie. Cassie went to Hank for certain invention help. Um, but oh jeez, yeah, and I like Janet. I mean, I kind of get it. Yeah, like she didn't want to talk about certain stuff that happened in the quantum realm. But at the same time, like she, for some reason, I didn't really like Janet in this movie. Like she tended to be vague, and I think her and someone else, they keep using like the Conqueror, he, the Hunter, blah blah blah. They never really said his name, like as if he was like Voldemort. Like you guys can say his name. Like we all know who the next big bad is. Like you don't have to keep teasing us with this name. So, but yeah, but it was kind of cool when Janet, before she had to get the manta looking thing right, um she had to like uh fight this character, and then like instantly like kind of give respect, like, hey, welcome back, and it's just like ha ha ha. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, Kang. Jonathan Majors did a really good job with Kang. Yeah, he could just pull off this villain. uh what's physique, this his physique vibe, nature kind of character. Like I remember watching a movie review about this movie, and it's just the way he smiles tends to be like somewhat of a friendly smile, but also like an evil smirk at the same time. He pulls off really well, especially since he's playing another antagonist for Creed 3, which he looks really jacked for it. Um, yeah, and yeah, John Majors, he does a really good King. I'm excited for the next couple of projects with him in it. Or one project, I don't really know. Yeah, he can be pretty powerful, but it turns out to be that it's only his suit that gives him like some of these like telepathy powers and his blasts and stuff. So it's only his suit. Without it, he's just him. It's just this guy. But then it turns out to be that it's interesting that he's been outcasted by his kind, which apparently his kind just looks a lot like him. Like they're clones basically. But he's like the most violent one, I think. But isn't I just read this that the writer for Quantumania and the King Dynasty, he said that He Who Remains from Loki is the most powerful Kang variant ever, because he's at the end of this time, and he's on this sacred timeline Earth. Well, not really Earth, but like, this is another thing I want to touch on a little bit. But he says that he's the only one, and he's killed off every multiverse timeline, and just settles on one. So that means he's the most powerful one, and just been settling for a while, which is crazy. And so now back to, well, Earth. So, or the TVA. So the TVA has been rumored that this little section of city, where was it? I think, what was it? Endgame, or I can't remember what movie this little city scene was in, but it's been rumored that the TVA is in the quantum realm, because as the TVA and the quantum realm, they both exist out of time and out of space, and time works differently in both places. So, and also, funny thing, the timekeepers in TVA, they tend to be giant robots. And they're not really all this big, powerful beings. Okay, so in the beginning of the movie, we have this whole dinner scene. Actually, no, before that. So, Scott, he goes on this little conference, or not conference, but like a red carpet tour thing about his book, which he talks about just kind of looking out for the little guy type thing, which is very also Spider-Man like. It got me like some Spider-Man vibes, which is another like bug themed hero, but on the opposite side of the country, which is also kind of funny that the guy at the coffee shop, he says, "Thank you, Spider-Man," but he lives in New York. This is California we're set in, and he calls him Spider-Man. He doesn't know Ant-Man. And then forwards on at the end of the movie, he's like, "Oh, you're the other bug hero. That'll be $4." I'm like, okay, because he's not Spider-Man, he gets to pay this time. Wow, that's kind of effed up. It's weird. So, which I remember that being a subtitle news thing in Wakanda Forever on one of the TVs. I'm like, I remember watching that on in the movie theater. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or was it Thor? It was either Thor: Love and Thunder or Wakanda Forever that had that subtitle news thing. I forgot. But yeah, so that's cool that they talked about that news subtitle thing. And then later on, they have this dinner. Yeah, and then they get to this little basement thing where Cassie talks about this new invention that she made. And then everyone gets sucked into the quantum realm, and then we get to meet these creatures. Like, there's so many creatures, these beings. There's a lot of these new beings here in the quantum realm. One of them looks really cool. The one with the staff and like the laser head thing, super cool. But there's like this little blob thing. I forgot his name, but apparently he's voiced by this guy who was one of the guys part of this new security team and for that works with Scott. So that's, I don't know. It's just weird because he's already a character in the surface world. Yeah, he voices another character who is like a completely different being in the quantum realm. So I don't know how that really works, but that got me realizing after the movie ended, there was no story recap thing that happens in the previous two movies. But I think in replacement for that, Scott now being like the narrator in the beginning and the end of the movie. And then it's kind of being like a little funny joke that this blob thing is like, "Oh, you guys have holes. I'm sorry, I don't have any holes. I don't have any holes. How many holes do you guys have?" And it just becomes this little running joke throughout the whole movie. and then he gets his little redemption thing called back up. He's like, I have holes, and then he starts like just gobbling these troops up. Yeah, it's just really odd. One of the oddest characters I've ever seen. But yeah, and talking about that fight though, so it's cool that so we have just the main. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, the main five like people, and then we have this army that Scott and Cassie have met previously, um, who lived kind of like the more low life, and now actually trying to like regain their city back. Um, and then when they were kind of like going down, because of well, the troops were barely even doing anything, but also Kang was like kind of like killing off people. I'm like, whoa! And then the ants came to help, um, and starts like just kind of like trembling over Kang. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Um, and also MODOK even tried to help with it. Hey, I'm done being a Richard, or just something like that. And then he's end up just dead. He's gone. So Darren is now gone for sure. And then later, so there was a cool little like 3 against 1 type of fight with Ant-Man, Wasp, and Cassie. They all had their turn and like trying to beat up Kang or like trying to, yeah, just trying to take him down. But Kang is a tough dude. He can punch and like he just fights fast, really quick, like pretty quick, like kind of like Thanos. Whenever he like he just like kind of fights the Hulk. He just go pa pa pa, gah. Like wow, he can move, and he's a big dude. Hulk is a little bit just bigger, and he doesn't really fight fast. He just goes yeah. But then Thanos is like that. Yeah, it's like jeez. Kang's pretty similar fights out. And he can pack a punch. And I'm surprised Scott even withheld his punches and yeah, he can like take the punches and he can also I almost forgot that Scott can kind of fight as well. And he can punch Kang. He can punch Kang, but he doesn't really do that much damage compared to what Scott's face looked like. It was like, oh jeez. And then one of my friends actually pointed out when we were watching the movie, he's like, because the helmet was busted throughout the fight, the suit is useless. Like he can't really shrink without a suit. So I'm like, that's a very good point. So now it's just fighting him for sure. But really good clutch when the portal was open. Hope came back to help, and then starts blasting him, and then this weird battery thing kind of absorbed him back. So I don't know if he's like gone, but that Kang is like he's gone, but I don't know if he's dead. Like even in the end of the movie, Scott's like, wait, did we actually kill him? We killed him, right? No, he might come back or something, because like if we win or something, the threat's gonna come back to the surface or something. I'm like, no, that's fine. I'm like, okay. I mean, Big Bad's gonna come anyway. Yeah, but it was pretty cool. At the end of the movie, also Scott kind of throws a birthday party because like it's not even my birthday. But yeah, to be fair, Scott did miss a few. It's like, oh, I'll throw in a random surprise birthday party just because. Um, yeah. Oh yeah, the Ammon. So this movie has, I think, 2 credit scenes, right? No, yeah. So the mid credit scene, um, it focuses on like this trio of Kang variants. We have like the one it was like I think based off the future. We have one that's like dressed as a pharaoh, and then there's another one that's like this emperor looking dude, like from some of the older Chinese dynasties, like just years and years ago. It looks like him. Like this Kang looks like those like older emperors, like the emperor in Mulan. He looks like that, in a way. And then they walk out into this huge like stage place full of Kang variants. There's so many Kangs. It's so interesting that they're all played by Jonathan Majors. It is an act in several different ways. So many times. It's insane. So yeah, that's the Kang Dynasty. They're gonna wrecks some stuff up. And then the post-credit scene is, oh gosh, this Kang variant, he had a name, I forgot what it was, but this is like, this Kang, like, took place, like a century ago or something. And then it turns out that Loki and Mobius, they both went to this time, I think, to try to find King, or I don't know what they were doing there, but they just found him, and then Loki's like, yo, that's him. He's like, who's the one that's supposed to be at the end of the time, who, like, he remains. And then Loki just looks scared. He is scared that something really bad's gonna happen soon. But I'm excited for season 2 of Loki coming out. I'm excited for this moment, for that specific moment, but I think that probably won't happen until, like, either in the middle of the show or later in the show or something, because they always tend to do that. Yeah, none of us could find any, like, Stan Lee cameos or Easter eggs or anything like that. But I did notice that there's this kid on this bench, kind of like in the beginning of the movie. Ant-Man high-fives this kid, and on the bench next to the kid, he has a backpack which has the first Ant-Man movie's, like, movie trailer as the design on the backpack. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So that's another Ant-Man Easter egg. Also talking about Kang. He was like, so he was talking to Ant-Man, and then Ant-Man was like, yo, you don't want to mess with me. I am an Avenger. And Kang's like, the Avenger? Oh. I've killed, like, multiple Avengers in my life, like, in different universes. I'm like, okay. And then, but then, like, he asks him, like, you're not the one with a hammer, are you? And then this joke, Scott, of course, kills it. I was like, nah, that's Thor. We have, like, similar body types, so we get mixed up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yo, sure. I mean, not the body type now. I think Thor, like, 7 years ago, yes, but not Thor now. You don't want, no. Oh, no, actually, he worked it off. I forgot. Thor worked out, and, like, oh, yeah. But that also hints that this Kang from the Quantumania movie, he's pretty, yeah, of course, he's violent, and he's, like, very powerful, because apparently, yeah, he can defeat almost every Avengers group in multiple timelines. I'm like, oh boy, this ain't good. That just kind of shows how powerful he is. Oh, Bill Murray! I forgot to talk about him. Yeah, he did pretty well. It was kind of funny. Yeah, apparently his character, he was like a lover with Janet, and when she was in the quantum realm, I'm like, oh, okay. But apparently Hank was kind of doing the same thing on the surface. It's like, oh yeah, I met this girl, but she wasn't Janet, blah, blah, blah. And then Janet's like, yeah, we used to have a thing, but it doesn't matter anymore. But so Bill Murray's character, I forgot his character name. He did pretty well. He was become, like, at the beginning or at the start, he's like pretty chill, and then later on he gets, like, kind of twisted, and then turns out he's been working for Kang for a while, even though he worked with, like, this resistance group, but it turns out it hasn't really done much people good. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm actually gonna turn to the dark side, basically. Yeah, pretty solid film. I enjoyed it. I would rate this, yeah, 4 out of 5. I rated 4 out of 5. Yeah, this movie was, like, pretty much, like, 2 hours, like 2 hours and, like, 5 minutes or something like that. Oh yeah, I've also heard that the pacing was just off about the movie. I found pacing probably just fine. Oh, fudge, sorry, I just thought about the beginning. So Jimmy Woo, he made an appearance, but he didn't really talk. He was just part of the recap thing. So apparently he's really good Jimmy's with Scott. So yeah, that happened, and then there's an old boss, the Baskin Robbins guy. Apparently, he's supposed to be good buddies with Scott. He's like, oh yeah, he's been employee of the month the whole dang time. Blah blah blah. And then like gives him like some free stuff or something. Oh yeah, we haven't seen the mom or the stepdad, the cop stepdad characters appear. I wasn't sure. I don't know if it's like Marvel's choice not to show them, or it was like a casting scheduling conflict or something, or they just didn't really want to do it. But it's kind of weird they didn't really show them. They mentioned the mom quite a few times. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Because it says Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, I feel like there wasn't really that much of Wasp in Ant-Man, even though it's an Ant-Man film. But it's been somewhat more focused on Ant-Man and Cassie. Yeah. That's just my opinion. I haven't seen that much Wasp action. But anywho, but yeah. So thank you guys for watching the movie review. If you liked it, give it a like. Comment what you guys think of the movie if you've seen it already. Subscribe while you're here and click on that bell so you guys won't miss any of my videos when they come on my channel. And I'm glad that I'm putting a little bit more effort into these movie reviews by showing like clips and stuff so you guys kind of know what I mean. Like, and kind of show visually what I'm trying to say. But yeah, and so for the next movie review, I know for sure, is Cocaine Bear. I'm pretty excited for the movie. I hope I'm entertained and thrilled. So until then, peace.